Yeah,
Madam Chair.
we're live. Excellent. Thank you very much. Good morning. Welcome everybody to the In Public Welsh Ambulance Trust Board. Very well welcome to Jane. A very early good morning. Welcome to you, Jane. Good to see you.
Morning, everyone.
Welcome to other. Good morning. Welcome to other folk joining us on screen. We have a number of apologies this morning. We have apologies from Estelle, from Angela, from the slice. We have apologies from Liam. And we have a few new faces to say hello to, particularly we say hello to Mishak. Good morning, Mishak, and welcome. Very warm welcome to you for your first board meeting with us today. And some other people who will be joining us on and off during the meeting, I think. My usual statement just for everybody that, externally for looking into this board meeting, the board meeting, this board meeting is the end of the governance process. Most of the hard work is done in all of our committees, and you'll be hearing more about that work as we go through the morning. I think that's all I probably need to say, apart from welcome to the British Sign Language. Rachel is busy there on screen, so thank you very much, Rachel, for joining us. And also to welcome to Alison Thomas from Slice again. So welcome to all those people joining us today. Item number 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Has anybody got anything they wish to declare in relation to items on the agenda today? Right, looks like that's okay. So item number 3 is for approval, and it's the minutes of the previous meeting, or 2 meetings in fact, 29th of May and the 26th of June. So the usual question, does anybody have any alterations, comments, corrections that they wish to see made for those minutes? No, in that case, I just ask if everybody is happy to approve those minutes, 29th of May, 26th of June, which got thumbs up. Good, thank you very much. Duly approved. Nod, Government Secretary. Excellent. Action log. There are 2 items which are open. Rachel, did you want to make any comment on?
Yes, I've had apologies. So the first one, I know I'd asked for them to come across, but I'm not sure if they have. No, they haven't. Right, I will chase that up with my team. So apologies for that. So we'll do that ASAP. And then the other one was around the action around including the task and finish group within the harm report, which is alluded to in the harm report.
Okay, that's good. Thanks very much. Any questions or comments, Rachel, on those 2 items? Thank you. Okay, item number 5 then is the Chair and the Vice Chair's report. Paper is there. It's been a very busy time for both me and for our Vice Chair, for Kerry. All the details are, I think, in the paper. Very happy to take any questions directed to me. If anybody's got anything they wanted to ask or add on my activities during the last 8 weeks or so since the last open board. And Kerry, is there anything you wanted to add from your perspective?
A couple of quick points, if I may. There's a couple of incorrect entries on mine, partly because I had to fit for a vehicle crisis.
You did.
I won't bore you with that. I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that my visit to Vantage Point House the week after the implementation of the new performance framework was really productive. So I know a lot of the non-executive directors also did visits during that week. And, what I observed was staff that were well informed, that were very comfortable with the new framework. I was able to see the clinical assessment in progress, and there was lots of assurance there. So I just wanted to reflect on that. I was also hearing about our work in mental health and the achievements of the mental health response vehicle, and I also took the opportunity to sit with some of our ambulance care colleagues as well. So a really productive and helpful insight. That's it. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Kerry. I just echoed that because I spent some time in the LW, the new call centre last week, I think it was now. And again, it's remarkable how all of the call handlers and the other staff within the contact centres have just taken the new purple performance target scheme that we've introduced as just as business as normal. When I was asking them how they felt about the introduction, they were kind of shrugging at me, saying, "Well, no big deal, it's just business as normal." And they were reflecting on the fact that the communication to them and the training that they've got and everything had been excellent. So once again, I think it's a real credit to the operations team for introducing that so well. Follows on from the massively successful introduction of the new IT systems that we did a bit of a rush a while back, but nevertheless delivered effectively, seamlessly, patients and to staff. And this was another example of that. So well done to everybody. And the other comment I'd make as well is a thank you, because you've reminded me, Kerry, that we've had 2 of our long service awards. So we do 3 of them. So if anybody external watching for interest, we do 3 long service awards periodically in 3 different geographical locations in Wales. And this is awarding people with their King's Medal for long service and meritorious conduct, and also rewarding people with medals for 20, 30 and 40 years of service with Welsh Ambulance. And these are fantastic events. They're very well supported by friends and family. And I think that all of the staff who attend really appreciate it. So we've done 2 of those so far in the last week up in North Wales and locally just down the road in Newport. And the 3rd one to be done Swansea way fairly soon. So big thanks to all the team who organise it. But again, a lot of work goes into organising those. So I think for me, they can pass that messages back to the comms team and so on who organise all of this. It's always well done. Much appreciated by everybody. Good. Okay. Any questions to Kerry? Screen. No. Okay. Right. In that case, we will move on, and we'll move on to item number 6, which is to the interim chief executive's report. So over to you, Rachel.
Thank you. So this is a report that Jason obviously completed just before he left. So the bit at the beginning is largely the actions and the meetings that he attended. But I thought I'd just pull out, as he has previously done, some items of note. So the first thing I was just going to pull out is, and linked a little bit to what you were just saying, Kerry, is that on paragraph 3, we note the refurbishment of the Llangynna estate has been completed, and I actually went down there a couple of weeks ago and talked to people about the new performance framework from their perspective. Similar messages to those that you heard as well, but it's a really lovely site, so much lighter an area, loads more room for people, so it was really lovely to see that. You can see on paragraph 7, and we've discussed this in the AGM, and we'll probably come on to a little bit more about this in the report on mitigation of avoidable patient harm. But we did go live with our new approach to the performance framework on the 1st of July, and that was a huge amount of work. And I think whilst there was work for our clinicians and call handlers to understand the system, the magnitude of the work went on behind the scenes, really, with kind of managers, leaders, digital colleagues who had to get all the systems in place for that to be enabled. So a big thank you to everybody for that. I wanted to pull out in paragraph 29. You can see here that we had ISO 14001, which is the internationally agreed environmental standard, and I'm really pleased to say that we have achieved that again. So we remain to be the only ambulance service that has achieved that accreditation, and it is not an easy thing to maintain it either. There's a huge amount of ongoing work, so really pleasing to see that. On paragraph 45, I wanted to pull out, because this is important kind of strategically, that we held a regional workshop with colleagues from Swansea Bay and Howth health boards recently, to look at how we might take forward remote clinical care and assessment together. Now, we know that the Cabinet Secretary has got a priority around regional working, and so to be part of and to influence the development of this regional workshop, I think was a really positive step, and it is something that I mentioned in a meeting recently with the Cabinet Secretary, that this was a really positive improvement. So that was really good to note. On paragraph 56, I was going to pull out, and you may have seen the kind of press on this or the social media on this, but we have gone live with our virtual assistant on the 111 website. Please do, if you happen to need 111, give it a go. What I understand from Johnny is that the more people use it, because it's an intelligent being, then the more it develops and improves. So do promote that with any friends and family as well. That was great. And the other thing on a digital matter in paragraph 88, I thought I'd put out because it's something that we'd been worried about before, and that was around the IG training. So I know we've been worried previously that we didn't achieve the 85% that we needed to. And so it's absolutely fantastic to see that we've now gone past that 85% threshold. So a big well done, particularly in ops, I think, for the work that was done to promote that across the organisation. And the last thing I was just going to mention, actually, Colin, was the long service awards. And I was just going to say that it was a real privilege, really, particularly to give people the 40-year bell, for those of you who were there. So Mike Jenkins, the regional clinical lead here in the South, Jill Plemming, head of service EMS coordination, and Carrie Jones, paramedic up in North Wales, all received 40 years, and they have all worked those 40 years within WAST. So we did say to them, you know, are they hoping to get to 50, you know, and do we need to start thinking what we might give as a 50? I don't think they're quite in that ballpark, but it was an absolute pleasure, as you say, Colin, to have been there for that. So thank you for those time to just give a couple of those items. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks. Yes, maybe we had to find a gold-plated bell.
Yes.
But it's really wonderful. Actually, talking to somebody with 40 years service, Jill, you were mentioning, it was interesting, I was talking to her on that occasion, and she joined the ambulance service. Well, there are two things to say about her, actually. One is that she joined the ambulance service as a call handler 40 years ago, and listening to her describe to me what the centre was like answering calls 40 years ago, pre, you know, mobile phones, pre computers, pre, you know, all the kind of systems that we have today. Basically, she was saying it was a phone and a piece of paper. I think how much change has been in those 40 years of the career that she's seen. It's been absolutely amazing. It's also, I think, a real flag in this, congratulations for the organisation, because there's an individual, like many individuals in the service, who started at a very base level as coming as a call handler, and 40 years on is a very senior member of the team here has had a very successful and flourishing career with it. A number of reasons why that was a very uplifting kind of conversation. Opening up for questions, I've got a couple of points, but opening up for questions to Rachel. Kerry.
I think maybe
Bethan's hand went up first.
Yes,
all right,
yeah.
go on, let's go. Oh.
I think I was third.
Oh, well, go on then, Bethan. We'll give you the floor.
Yeah, exactly.
One comment and one question from me, please. If I share the comment first, paragraph 108 refers to the WAST quality event that we held a couple of weeks back, and that's our second in WAST. And I was able to attend, and it was great to be there with colleagues. There was a really good mix of people across different directorates. And what I felt was that aside from that event being really good, and it was, and you could see the people were really listening, they were really engaged with the event as it was playing out. But I think it provides us with a really strong platform that we can build on year and continue to embed that and enhance that really next year as well. So that was my comment. The question relates to paragraph 36, please, if I can, and it relates to the Welsh language. So I know that we undertook a self-assessment exercise in May of this year against the Welsh language standards. And I can see that we've received 33 responses from managers across the trust. I just wanted some context around the number 33, really, in terms of responses. Were we surprised at that being very low? If so, what else can we do to enhance it moving forward?
Yes, so we'll have the Welsh Language Annual Report coming to PCC in a couple of weeks. So you'll see that feed through, and it's the first year. You might remember that last year we said we'll have a baseline of compliance standards we're going to focus on. So things like communication, signage, reception services, etc. And so that was our first attempt to actually audit those. We haven't had, as you say, a huge takeout. But the intention is to build that and have some other areas of audit as well. But it has given us some really interesting information, particularly in particular pockets where we know Welsh language is stronger. And they'll feed through through the report that you'll see as well. So it's the first start of something that gives us a bit more of an objective compliance baseline, because otherwise we wanted to give as much assurance as we possibly could. So bigger and better this year.
Thanks, Beth. And we'll just go around the table, shall we? So let's go to Rhiannon.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I was just wondering if the life X has gone into the TLW, so that's good that we, with the first hand, we'll just have it. I just wondered if there was plans to have it in the other control rooms. That was one question. I was wondering about the move of the staff from Planet to Matrix, how the staff were feeling about that, because there wasn't a sense in the update. And then at 78, the proposed generic clinical metrics and condition-specific metrics. I just wondered how we'll come to select those. So is it evidence-based? Why have they been? Thank you.
Okay, great. You want to go next, Andy, to respond to that last part? I think you were, I see you nodding there on that.
I can do the last one, but
Yes.
yes,
I thought we might do actually. I saw you nodding there, so why not go there first?
So we had a workshop into where we got a number of clinical colleagues around and commissioners as well to sit with us to say what do we feel are going to be the reasonable proxy measures of the quality of care. So we had a very long list of different things that we'd love to measure. And then you start to boil that down, well, what can we actually measure and how easy would that be? And essentially that's where we got to these. So they aren't intended to be all encompassing where we measure everything. As I said, these are kind of indicators of the improvements in quality and a mix of, yes, we can measure these very specific for these very specific conditions. These ones, such as pain management, as for instance, would have commonality across a number of conditions. So we'd kind of aim to measure those in terms of it. It's a very much a start for 10. We will refine and hopefully grow as we go on capacity.
Good, thanks. And the first other two questions, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll turn that, Chair. What was good about this is that it's obviously there's other services with this control room solution in place. We're the first to have transitioned it from one site to another. And that's because of the significant benefit that this solution has versus the much more hardwired previous version. So I don't want to underestimate still the amount of work that Johnny's team had to do, but this is far more plug and play than its predecessor.
And plans to have it in the other?
It is.
Oh, it is.
Yes, this was about it already being installed where it was, and then we've now gone to a new site,
Right, okay.
taking that kit in a way that's much
I have
easier.
appreciated that from the narrative. Thank you.
And you're welcome at the
I
Matrix
asked
move
about
as well,
the
yes.
staff and Matrix,
Yeah.
and that's Carla.
I think it was either Chris or in terms of the estate move
Yeah.
and where
Do
we
know
got
the-
to with that.
Do we know the staff, up for the move, they're feeling?
I'm not aware of any issues with it from the state capital perspective or
We-
state capital led scheme, but I can't imagine there will be
It's not
because
far.
it's around the corner
I know,
and it's
yeah,
into a
I
much
know.
better facility. If anything, the impact possibly is probably on the existing staff within Matrix and have to move them around a little bit to accommodate it. So that's probably where we might get a little bit more of a bit of work to do, but I wasn't aware of everybody's feeling because Barnet has been on our list of sites that we want to improve, particularly the car parking and other ancillary elements of it for a long while.
We'll just check on that but I don't think there's any issues. And as part of all those capital programs and moves, there's always a staff group that is established, and we've got kind of robust mechanisms for making sure we're communicating those things.
Or a nod from Damon, so.
Oh, good.
Good.
Okay, yeah, good, okay. Good, thanks, Rhiannon. I think Kerry then probably next.
Yeah, a couple of observations and a question. So I just wanted to mention the ISO 14001 again, and I think worth mentioning twice. Congratulations on that. And also to highlight the fact that I don't think it's in here that Johnny's been appointed to the British Computer Society, and I think it's a fantastic accolade for us. And so congratulations on that. And also to highlight that we had a board meeting at the Merthyr Fleet workshop, and that provided an opportunity for us to go and meet the staff. And I think there's just such a sense of pride there and we saw some of the new vehicles, and yeah, it's a real privilege. But you know, I left there just with that sense that staff, whilst they're not frontline, they're really proud of their role in enabling us to be the best we can be in the community. So just that reflection. And then my question was on Save a Life Cymru. So it's now part of WAST, and I just wonder at some point, either through committee or through board, can we have an opportunity to see that, you know, strategic and operational context? Because it feels to me there's some excellent opportunities for us to further our own strategic ambitions through that collaboration.
I don't know, Andy, whether you want to come in on that one.
That can be really, yes, they're happy to kind of share. When we've, SALC have come across, we've come with a currently existing quite a long to-do list, which we are kind of integrating into our to-do list in terms of joining up where they've overlapped and where there's combined efforts. Some of the things that SALC have on their to-do list are very much for our classes, they're very long burn, you know, where it's children legislation, things such as that. We just in the final process of actually when we wrote back to Welsh Government following the implementation of phase one of the performance measure changes, we offered we'd like to discuss further with Welsh Government about where we can go bigger and bolder on some of these aspirations. Now they've come back this week and said, yeah, we'd like to have that discussion. So we're just in the final stages of planning an element of that. But yeah, in terms of, to go to your question there, Kerry, about sharing some of the work away from SALC and how we're blending that together with our stuff, more than happy to either do this as a future board development. Sorry, Trish, I know that's probably going to add pressure, but or a bespoke event if need be, but you know, whichever way we can work it out.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, thanks, Kerry. Jane, do come in.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, I just wanted to reference at paragraph 114. I think always good to be recognised as a leader in the field. So congratulations really to Angie and her team, and particularly Catherine Goodwin, continuing to share the best practice that we're developing in a much wider public sector leaders conference. You know, the work on workplace sexual safety. So really good to see that.
Great, thank you very much, Jane. Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My observation and a comment with the fleet in paragraphs 31 and 32. We're all aware of the good news we had of that, you know, additional Welsh Government funding of 22.5 million. And I think paragraph 2 is really helpful in sort of articulating the spread and the mix of the purchases across the vehicle type. And as we heard earlier in the AGM, where we can buy environmentally friendly, we're doing so. But my substantive point is, whilst it's good news, as far as Chris's team and others are concerned, there's a lot more work in terms of getting that 22.5 million spent in the year, going through procurement processes, commissioning processes, and a whole raft of logistical and practical issues. So really well done to see from this that it seems everything is being planned accordingly to get those 142 vehicles, not just bought, but commissioned and operational this year. So really, really good, because that's probably double, Chris, isn't it? But the 142 is roughly double what we would normally get in the year. So that comes with its challenges, but reassuring to hear that, you know, we're on track, aren't we? It looks like, to get everything done and dusted this year. So well done.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I just had a couple of things. I wanted just to reference an item in the paper, I forget which paragraph it was now, but about the use of video within our call centre. And for those of you who haven't seen it, I haven't seen it in action yet myself either, but I've had a number of call operators talking to me about it, and also clinicians talking to me about it, really singing its praises, really saying how amazingly effective it is to be able to use the video connection between them in the contact centres and the patient in their homes or wherever they are. And on a couple of occasions, clinicians were talking me through some real life examples where the ability to be able to actually observe the patient was really important. One in particular, just for interest's sake, was actually a mother who rang 111, was put through to the clinical desk. She was mildly concerned about her child, but was very calm on the phone. But the nurse, as it happened, who was dealing with that call, instigated the video, And as a result of that video, was able to diagnose that actually the condition of the child was a lot more serious than the mother had sort of indicated. Maybe the mother was being sort of over calm or whatever, I don't know. But it was a really good example of where the video had actually helped to escalate a clinical condition, which wouldn't possibly have happened if it hadn't been in use. So I think it's just good for us all to know that that is now live. People are using it, and the feedback from clinicians is extremely positive. So again, it's a well done to all, well, I guess Johnny and others who've been involved in actually putting that in place. And the technology is amazing. They just send a text and kind of take over the patient's phone. So it's quite remarkable. The other thing I wanted to mention, I don't know, Andy, whether you want to make a comment on this, but I was very pleased to see that both you and Liam are now a part of the W45 work group, which of course is the work group set up by Welsh Government to really push on handover delay. W45, for anybody outside wondering what that is, it's about ensuring that handover delays at hospital ramps are no more than 45 minutes. Bit late to the party, it seemed, in some ways, but great to see your name there. So I thought it might be worthwhile just asking you to make a comment about it, perhaps.
Yeah, well, better late than not.
Yep.
Indeed. But no, it's starting to prove to be quite a useful group, and there's really a momentum building in terms of the work over there. I don't necessarily think we can relate any of the improvements to date to the W45 group, because the work we've done hasn't necessarily. But what it is proving a real opportunity to do is bring through some of the learning we've seen on site that have shown some success. Swansea in particular, we saw this week, in terms of them presenting some of the actions they've undertaken, and how we can then start to put that across to the rest of the system, and where that shared learning is. What's planned for later in the later in the summer, shall I say, rather than the year, is going to be a series of workshops which will bring the health boards, members of the W45 group and members of Welsh Government together to then share that learning, see how for those areas that are being successful, how we can embed that in terms of the actions that they've taken and make that just BAU. But then also for those sites that continue to struggle, what they can pull across and learn from the sites that have shown progress. So at the moment now, NHS Performance Improvement are establishing a series of these workshops on when they're going to run and what order we're going to run them in. So it shows real promise in terms of embedding that. And of the presentations you had so far, you can see those consistent themes for those sites that have had success coming through in each site, and well, you can see exactly what makes a difference. And full enough, it isn't more beds, it isn't more ED capacity. It's a system buy-in and leadership that you're seeing across the sites that have had that success is the thing that's starting to deliver the long-term change and improve the flow.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, just reflect on what Hospital of England was saying a year ago when they came to talk about it, and what Cardiff and Bern have been saying for some time. Good. And the only comment I was going to make was there's a reference about Windows 11, Johnny. I don't know again whether you want to make any comment on that, because I've got a very old Steam-driven laptop at home. It keeps telling me that I've got to buy a new one because Windows 11 won't download on it, and I'm just wondering whether we're in a similar position at all.
We are, yeah. So we're ahead of the game with this one. So Windows 11, the 4th update will come out in October this year. We started about 6-7 weeks ago in terms of piloting our install. Most of the executive team have had that update or are due to have that update certainly in the next 2 weeks. Everything's going pretty well so far. So we do the pilot test, and we do a broader pilot test, and we don't know that to everybody else. But yeah, we're on track, no issues to report.
Great, Grant, thanks very much. So final call for any questions to Rachel or anybody else before we move on? Good. All right. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks Rachel. So we move on to item number 7, which is the patient story, and we're joined by a clinical navigator, by Mike Horrigan. Can you hear us, Mike?
Morning, everyone. Yes, I can hear. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can indeed. So warm welcome to you. Lee, are you introducing this? Or?
Yeah, very short intro, Chair. Morning, Mark. So to introduce Mark Horrigan, who's clinical lead in Andy's team, in fact. For EMS coordinator. And the reason why we're going to hear from Mark is that he's had experience and been a key player in the shaping of what we now know as the clinical navigators and their involvement in far earlier streaming of 999 activity. So Mark's going to share a little bit about his personal time, but also his involvement in that element of the clinical model transformation. So I won't steal any more of Mark's thunder and hand over to you.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Over to you.
Lovely, thank you. Just want to apologise I can't be with you this morning as well in person, but I didn't return from North Wales till late yesterday evening, so apologies I'm not there with you in the room. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone see that? Someone shut
Yes,
that?
we can, yeah.
Yeah,
Lovely.
fab. Okay, so thank you for inviting me for a start. So I'm going to share a little bit about me personally to start with, and then my experience of developing the initiative Rapid Clinical Screening into the service and the development of the Clinical Navigator role as well. So I started my career in May 2006. So this is WAST will be the third ambulance service that I've actually worked for, NHS ambulance service. So I started in May 2006 in England when English ambulance services were still county ambulance services. So I worked for Tees East and North Yorkshire ambulance service prior to their amalgamation in July 2006 to the services that we know now following the Peter Bradley report in 2005. So I spent a year there as a call handler before moving over to the South Central Ambulance Service. Being born and bred in Port Talbot, I wanted to eventually end up back home, so that was a little bit closer than where I was living in Middlesbrough at the time. So I moved to South Central in Oxford in May 2007, initially as a call handler for around 6 months there, and then I was successful in obtaining a direct entry onto an emergency medical technician program there in 2007. So I worked in SCAS there until 2011, July, which is when then I returned to WAST in July 2011. So I joined WAST as an EMT on our heart team, where I spent 3 years there on heart before returning to frontline operations in 2014 to consolidate my practice as a paramedic. Later then becoming a senior paramedic and integrated care clinical lead, and finally in the role that I'm in now as the clinical lead for EMS coordination since July 2024. So I just want to take you through some of my experiences that we've had developing the clinical navigator role. And just to start off, just to give you a little bit of background around clinical screening, rapid clinical screening as we know it now. But clinical screening isn't new to the organisation. It was already undertaken during levels of escalation, initially, I believe, by our APPs when we were working on our demand management plan, which then later became the clinical safety plan, which was then more formally undertaken using the technology we have in the CAD in 2022. That was usually undertaken when we were in higher levels of CSP, so when the demand increased, we had to increase our clinical safety plan, and when we reached CSP 3B and 4A, that's when clinical screening was then enacted within the integrated care space. So whilst working as the integrated care clinical lead, we started undertaking tests of change late in 2023 to review the feasibility of introducing clinical screening as a business as usual function. So this initially started with one health board, then it moved to a region, before a test when we undertook it WAST-wide, and then finally we undertook it WAST-wide with the removal of the no-send function that we enacted in the clinical safety plan. Then later, early 2024, there was a QSPE Directorate Organisational Change Plan, which has now led to our alignment with EMS coordination. So the Quality Directorate undertook an organisational change process, which in a nutshell led to them becoming the clinical leadership team for any remote care involvement, and then Andy's team would take over the clinical leadership for any involvement for patients which required a scene response using an ambulance. So that led to us being involved or being directly affected by that OCP, not involved in the Quality Directorate OCP, but we were directly affected by that OCP, which then led to our alignment with EMS coordination, following additional funding received by the Trust during the last financial year, allowed Andy and the team to develop, put this rapid clinical screening into place. So we had to develop the role, what the role would do and how they would do it. We had to choose a job title. There's not many other services who are doing what we are doing, and if they are doing it, they're doing it relatively differently. So there was a lot of other titles considered, but we settled on clinical navigator because the team are navigating our patients through their journey through our service. We had to write a job description and get that through the necessary job evaluation process. And then recruit the team. So the initial phase of recruitment, we required 28.6 full-time equivalent staff members. So that initial stage of recruitment saw over 75 applicants for the role. Of those 75, around 55 were then shortlisted, interviewed, clinically assessed, all of which required building from scratch the clinical assessment and interview process, because this was a brand new role to the organisation. And of those 55 that were interviewed and assessed, 29 were successful. We had to develop the CAD functionality, so we use within the CAD an advanced questionnaire module. So it is a CAD functionality that has been built and tested by us. It's been built by the team with the assistance of the EMS systems team. And that the AQMs then host all of the tasks that are completed by the clinical navigator team. And the AQMs are there to standardize that clinical documentation of the navigators. And it also includes some automated CAD commands, so it will undertake some of the functions that the navigators do, for example, moving patients through to the integrated care space. That will undertake, the AQM will undertake that function in the background of the CAD to save that being a manual task for the actual individual clinician. It also supports audit and data collection, and the AQMs have developed significantly since October, November 2024, when we initially put them into place, when we went live, and they've definitely become more complex and provides the team with robust support and information. And we've developed more background functionality on each of the CAD updates that we've had, particularly the latest one in July. We had to develop a way so that we could audit the activity of these clinicians. So we've developed audit tools for each of the strand of the AQM and a marking matrix. And there's an electronic feedback mechanism and report generation that's been put in place, which has been heavily supported with the operations quality team. So thank you very much to them for that. And we have a quality assurance framework for all remote clinicians in development. We had to develop the SOP sections. So we initially, for the go live in November, we developed the standard operating procedures for more so around the roles that the staff would be undertaking during the initial go live period. So the interim SOP sections were developed for go live, and since then a full SOP has been written and is now being approved at the relevant governance groups within the trust and is now available for the team. And finally, the training, 20 staff completed the training in November 2024. So as a team, we had to undertake all of the training for these clinical navigators that joined us, with support from specialists around the trust. And candidates then would also join external training courses, such as the MPDS training course from our external providers and partners. The remaining candidates that were successful interview were then joining us in January 2025. So these were candidates that joined from external organisations who had longer notice periods, which we had very little control over. So they had to join us later in January 2025. The clinical induction then involved 1 week's in-house training, primarily facilitated by us, the clinical leadership team, and internal subject matter experts, followed by their external courses, and then a mentorship period and sign-off. So the phases of implementation. So obviously we went live with the clinical navigators on the 18th of November 2024. Initially, that was with the realignment of backup requests, so our volunteer and alternative responders, and remote clinical support, so providing support to our crews who were on the scene, was realigned from the clinical support desk to the clinical navigators on the 18th of November. Followed shortly, 2 days later, by queue safety activities then being commenced by the clinical navigators. On the 25th of November, we realigned the review of high acuity calls, and the initial clinical screening commenced, but during the CSP escalation, as I mentioned earlier on, that was then realigned from the clinical support desk over to the clinical navigators on that date. On the 3rd of December, clinical screening began for our green calls, shortly followed by Amber 2 on the 10th of December. And finally, Amber 1 calls on the 6th of February this year. And as we know, on the 1st of July 2025, the implementation of the phase 1 of the clinical model transformation saw the introduction of arrest, emerge, and the RCS 0 categories. And then later this year, we'll have the implementation of phase 2 of that clinical model transformation. Just some personal experience during these phases of implementation. Obviously, there was a large amount of additional work required to be on site, supporting the team, including long days and sociable hours, just to be available there to support the teams and across as many sites as possible. Leading into the go live was required. So there has been some challenges along the way. Initially, during summer 2024, there was no locality manager in post. So the EMS reconfiguration was also ongoing during the initial stages of implementation of rapid clinical screening. And being a team of 3 clinicians trying to manage staff who've never managed staff before it was quite challenging on times, but we received great support from Lee's direct team and from senior EMSC leadership team and corporate services as well. There's been a lot of ICT changes since implementation in November, particularly to the CAD, and as the AQMs have developed and as the CAD has changed, those changes have been implemented with a view to improving the processes for our staff and patients and to improve data capture. Some of those changes have then had an equal and opposite reaction elsewhere. So even though testing was robust, the behavior of the CAD with live users was not realized until full implementation into the live CAD. So these issues were then identified during the go live period, and some remedial work was required, with some last minute changes approved in the strategic cell during go live week, which has then resolved the issue using the background functions of the AQM. So this has enabled further improvement for our staff by implementing this change. And I think it's really worth noting and paying tribute to the team that they've been very receptive to change and embraced every update that we've had to implement. When we make ICT and CAD changes, that obviously then has an effect on our standard operating procedures, the actual technology, the AQM, our training guides and our staff training. So on each occasion where we've had to make a technological change, that has then resulted in changes required to our SOPs, the technology and the training required for our staff. There's a large amount of a large demand or significant demand on us regarding putting things right in concerns related work. So naturally, given the large number of interactions that our team has with patients that are coming into the service, this is expected. The large majority of these reviews of the cases have been appropriately managed by our team in the patient's journey through the trust, but the review of these incidents is becoming more complicated, particularly with the patient's journeys through our trust being involved with more of our services that could start in the 999 call handling arena, come through rapid clinical screening and be passed to our integrated care space. They could be picked up by the seasonal desk. They could be involved with the care planning. Staff, also our PTAS and APP navigator colleagues, and finally ending up on a response queue waiting for an ambulance response if that's required. But we have excellent working relationships with operations quality and our putting things right team, and there are streamlined processes in place to review this concerned work, but it's definitely very demanding on the diary with a minimum of 8 hours a week for one individual, just to review all the concerns that are coming in, with any additional time then required for any investigative and supportive work that's required. So just to give you a little idea on the numbers, since the 1st of January this year, we've reviewed 260 cases for our serious case incident forum. 114 cases have been discussed on the rapid incident review. We've reviewed 170 cases with our operations quality colleagues and 141 data accidents since the beginning of the year. Has been some data challenges. So currently the ODU dashboard reports the screening time from the time that the incident arrives on the screening queue to the time that the AQM is completed. So this doesn't always account for the commencement of the screening process, as at the end of rapid clinical screening, the AQM completion is a retrospective process, with the AQM being the repository for that decision. So the incident has already been reviewed by the navigator at that point, and the AQM at the end is simply the repository for that decision. So when we introduced our changes on the 1st of July, we've introduced a new step within that process, a technological step, which will now allow reporting on the time that, or more accurate reporting on the time that patients are actually waiting for screening until the point that clinical review commences by a clinical navigator. Recent updates will also now allow us to review screening outcomes by MPDS code as well, which will allow us to review the current codes that are deemed suitable for clinical screening to see if there's any necessary changes to be made. So for example, if we have a code that is predominantly screened to the response queue and there's a high level of conveyance from scene, then is there any benefit to putting that code through rapid clinical screening? Should we just send it to the response queue first as last? And finally, we've definitely had some recruitment difficulties, particularly in North Wales. Initially thought to be the relocation from Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwr over to TLV. So when we recruited the initial cohort of staff, a lot of them lived over in the northeast area of Wales. So we initially thought that the location was proving difficult over in Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwr. We've since moved to TLV on the move in May. And we've attempted to do some targeted recruitment in the north, but unfortunately, that's also proved unfruitful at the time. And finally, I just want to give you an idea of the actual figures and number of contacts that a team of 30 individuals are actually doing. So this data is correct until 0300 hours on July the 29th from the 18th of November this year. So high acuity live review, that's been attempted 17,385 times, where of those times 13,000 of those cases high acuity live review was possible. The other 4,000 cases haven't been possible, and that could be down to our call handlers no longer being on the line anymore. They may have had to come off due to urgent disconnect, or there may have been a healthcare professional already on scene which didn't require the EMD to remain on the line. So of those 13,000 cases where we have been able to undertake high acuity live review, nearly 20% of those incidents were downgraded from a red to amber 1. And 52% of those were deemed to be appropriate red incidents. The other 30% or so of those incidents are outcomes of where the crew has arrived at scene. So during the review process, an ambulance response has arrived during that review, or as a result of receiving new information. The call handler has been able to downgrade the incident within the ProQA software. And since the changes on July the 1st with the introduction of RCS 0, of the RCS 0 cases that have been reviewed, 28% of those cases have been passed over to integrated care for rapid clinical assessment. Rapid clinical screening. So far, as of the 29th of July, we have reviewed 105,813 incidents that have been deemed suitable for rapid clinical screening. That's on average around 17,500 calls screened every month, since full implementation in February, with, to be expected, our busiest days being Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays. The latest data showing that around 58% of these patients that come through rapid clinical screening are initially passed to integrated care for a clinical assessment, and around 42% are passed directly to the ambulance response queue for a scene response. The team have undertaken 56,226 queue safety reviews. That is incidents that have been reviewed whilst they are waiting for an ambulance response to ensure that it's the correct response. They have an appropriate resource that's been recommended to attend, or to review if the patient may have got better or got worse, that response category can be reviewed. And of those 56,000, nearly 25,000 calls that were reviewed during queue safety were also then moved to integrated care for further clinical assessment. We've received 2,641 backup requests. So these are backup requests from our volunteer responders. And of those requests, 71 occasions were identified where that incident was immediately life-threatening, and an immediately life-threatening response, backup response, was provided for those volunteers. We've undertaken 3,350 remote clinical support. So these are supporting our own crews. So 72% of those are supporting WAST crews on scene with their decision making. The other 28% have been reviewing incidents where healthcare professionals have raised concerns and requesting a clinician review of that incident. And we've supported our colleagues in the police on 530 occasions. So now we have all 4 police forces currently live with us on the police support line. Of those 530, 300 of those requests have been received by Gwent Police, but they have been the longest serving police force in that pilot, so that is to be expected. And as a team, they have received 18,669 calls into that team. So that could be from our crews at scene, our volunteers requesting backup, or any colleagues from the ODU, our response coordinators, our shift managers, and our operational managers over in EMS coordination bringing into the service. That's a lot. Definitely some impressive figures there for such a small team. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Really interesting, really illuminating, very helpful. Let's open it up to any questions or comments. Bethan's hand's shooting up, and Dan as well. Let's go to Bethan. We go. All right, let's start with Andy. Then we'll just go around the table, shall we? Let's start with Andy.
Mark will be pleased. It's not a question. It's essentially a big thank you. I think what you can illustrate from Mark's presentation is the sheer complexity of what it is we've implemented with the clinical nurse, and it's essentially it develops a new language. Never mind a new way of working. There are so many of these things that simply didn't exist prior to the 1st of November. And Mark and the rest of the team have been absolutely instrumental in working with Lee's team to develop this new way of working and making it safe and really helping us kind of address what will be probably the most important part of the changes within our model. So I think it's all credit to Mark, and thank you very much for coming today, Mark, to present. Because I know you didn't get that. I kind of dropped this on you midway through your holiday, and you kind of you picked up and ran with it. So I'm really appreciative of both coming today, but also the work that's gone on before.
Thanks, Andy. Definitely echo that. So just moving around the table then, probably to Bethan next.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, thank you for that. You clearly had a very varied career history, and I've no doubt that variation will help you in your current role, really, to navigate your own way through these changes. Did you like that? That wasn't the comment. Clearly, listening to you there, it is very complex, as Andy has said. And my question's around, in terms of the newly created clinical navigator roles and perhaps the wider clinical model transformation piece. You talked a lot about process there throughout your presentation, and we can see just how complex this whole piece is and how crucial each part is on the other, and the linkage between the individual parts coming together. My question is around, what are some of the key direct benefits to patients this far in terms of the journey that we're on? So I accept we're not yet there, there's further to go. But as chair of WAST, my question is, so far, several months into this journey, what are some of the key tangible benefits for our patients out there in the community as a result of the introduction of the clinical navigator role and also the clinical model transformation? Thank you.
Thank you, Bethan. I definitely think it's definitely had the positive impact. We've already heard some of that this morning at the start of the board meeting and through the AGM. So obviously the patients that are identified for suitable for rapid clinical screening are reviewed. And the average time for that for today, for example, is around 5.5 minutes. So when they come into the service, they've been reviewed very early on within their journey. So we are selecting those patients who may benefit from that clinical assessment. As we've removed that no-send service, we are accepting all that risk into our service, and we want the public to ring us, and we will then direct them to the most suitable pathway that they require for their treatment. And by doing so, we are then preserving those precious resources that we have for those who desperately need an ambulance response. So by selecting those patients that require further clinical assessment, it does allow us to then respond more quickly and more readily available to those patients who are in dire need and need our responses very quickly.
Great. That's a great answer. Thank you. And can I just say finally, Mark, I'm really pleased you found your way home after starting up in the north of England. So croeso nôl I Gymru. Thank you.
Right, so moving around, I think to Rhiannon next.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think a comment and a question, but it may be two questions. So one, we've got a university trust status, and I'm really mindful that this is like a role that hasn't existed, but we should be trying to use evidence base where evidence exists or create it. So it was that thing around evaluations and research potentially. So that was a question or a comment. My other one was more to Mark. How do we get a sense of job satisfaction? So hearing the issues with the North, but lots of people coming into the role, I guess they land and it feels perhaps very different to what they might have perceived it was going to be like. So how are we getting that sense of job satisfaction so that whatever things that will make it even better as a role can be put in there?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're definitely very present in all of our control rooms at all times. So we work clinically. We are doing the clinical leads for EMS coordination are doing this role on a weekly basis. So we are doing the role that we're asking of our staff. So we get to see the challenges that they are facing daily. So we are very present in our control rooms. Our staff can reach out to us at any time, and we're available. We're a big leadership team for such a small team, but that is required because of the demand and the amount of patient contacts that we have. But we're definitely very visible. The job satisfaction from the feedback that we're getting is very high. Staff love the role. They love what they're doing. We have had some staff join us from road operations who've never worked remotely before and haven't felt that remote care was for them. So we have lost 3 staff who joined us from road operations and have gone back to road operations because we know that remote care isn't for everyone when you've got all of your senses taken away from you compared to dealing with patients face to face. But the feedback that we are hearing is extremely positive, and I'd happily invite anyone in the room today to come and spend a day with us and the team to see how they're doing.
I think the first part.
Yes, thank you, Andy.
So obviously we've commissioned an organisation to be the evaluator of the CMT programme. That would be very much part of what we do in terms of pulling through that evidence and working on the background. So,
Do we have a timeline on that?
do we have a timeline? No. Hugh, do we have a timeline?
Not yet, no. So once we actually formally engage with a supplier, we'll have that's the first thing we'll be working up to the detailed plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Fiona. So moving on down.
So my question was the same as Bethan's. She beat me to it. But that was really helpful, Mark. Really informative. I just had a supplementary question about whether we had a sense of how this role was perceived by patients.
We don't yet. I don't know if our patients know that we even exist. It's the function that's undertaken in the background remotely. So I don't believe that we have any indication of how patients feel about our role.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Well, pretty much all my questions have been, but I like that. But, for me, seeing the numbers is really helpful here. So if I'm right, Mark, I think I've understood that we downgraded 20% of red calls, which means that, of course, we can get to higher risk patients quicker. So just that number in itself has really jumped out at me today. And I know you shared a lot with us, and I'd quite like to have another look at the presentation. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for highlighting that, and my questions have been answered.
Great. Thanks, thank you. Then I'll come back and then we'll go around. I'm going to come back to you.
So just come back on the patient experience. So we are thinking about patient experience methods. Well, I'm going to be yesterday when we look about whether we can identify the cohort of patients who are going through the remote process and whether we can go specifically out to them. So we are looking at that. We haven't thought out the answer yet. We'll be trying to answer that question.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Hi, thanks, Mark. One of my questions relates to the challenges that you raised, and in particular, the amount of time to investigate, putting things right, concerns and complaints. And obviously I would say this being from Llaes, it's really important that individuals who raise concerns have those responses, but fundamentally, most people raise concerns because they want there to be some learning. So I wondered if you were able to describe any major or key learning from those investigations of the complaints that has informed the ongoing development of the approach being taken.
Yeah, absolutely. Thankfully, we haven't had any a large number of issues directly associated to the team. But as I said, the team are very, very receptive. We are working a professional to our professional registrations, where learning is part of that process, and clinical reflection is a big process when things haven't gone quite right, so that we learn and go forward, and we've learned from that event so it doesn't happen again. I'd probably say the biggest theme and trend that we identify is documentation standards, and we feed that back through our audit process. So whilst we can see the thought process of clinicians by their actions within the CAD, essentially what's not written down has never happened is the old term, isn't it? So the colleagues need to be very clear in their documentation, particularly when we make quite high risk based decisions. So when we have high levels of demand, thankfully at the moment it has settled, but earlier on in the year when we first started, demand was exceptionally high, and the team were making high risk based decisions. For example, they may have been asking integrated care to review patients to make their own way who were possibly having a stroke or a heart attack, because they knew at the time an ambulance unfortunately wasn't going to arrive within an acceptable time frame. So by making that high risk decision was definitely the safest thing to do for patients, whilst not best practice, but that hasn't always been reflected in documentation. So documentation standards are heavily important, particularly when it comes to reviewing patient concerns, that we have that documentation and we can understand the reasons behind why clinicians make decisions that they do every day.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, thanks so much. Nobody on screen with hands up. I think that's it. So I think, Mark, time has come to say thank you very much indeed. Really informative. I suspect you might receive a few emails from some of my NED colleagues to take you up on the day. You'll certainly get one from me. It's been very helpful and very informative. So thank you very much. And we'll wish you a good day.
Lovely.
Thank
you for having me. I just want to
you.
reiterate the thanks to obviously our team who are working extremely hard, and also my team who I couldn't do my job without. So thank you very much to everyone.
Absolutely well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Thanks everybody. So moving on to the follow-up, there's a little bit item here, 7.1 staff story follow-up of Mr. Maxwell. I don't know who was going to mention that. Rachel, you going to say something?
Yeah, this was just an update to let the board know that the story that came from Mr. Maxwell around his death of his wife and Mr. Maxwell and his son provided a story which we previously heard, but was also heard by the Joint Commissioning Committee at its last meeting. So it's a very powerful video that people will remember, and just the kind of ongoing trauma, I think, associated with the family in terms of the length of time they had to wait and kind of deal with that was very powerful at the Joint Commissioning Committee. And people were kind of visibly moved, and I think it really shone a great light on the risk that the JCC holds, which is one of its highest risks, around the ability of our service to get to people in a timely fashion. So I felt whilst it was a difficult meeting and a difficult discussion and difficult to hear, I think the lay members and the members, the staff within the JCC just found it really helped to kind of centre, why we do what we do, and why the risk was so high, and why it was so important to continue to discuss the actions that we can collectively take with our health board colleagues to improve services. So just wants to share that, because I just thought it was really good that they heard that story.
No, right, indeed. And of course, a patient story, not staff story.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So we'll move on, if we may, from that. And just so people are aware, timing factors, it's just gone 12:10. We will break for lunch around about 1 o'clock, depending on when the natural break comes. And then we'll continue after that. So we move on now to item number 8, which is with you, Rachel, the actions to mitigate avoidable harm, one of our routine items on the board agenda.
Yes, thank you. So as you say, this is, for people listening in, this is a report that we've been providing to board really for nearly, for 3 years now, making sure that the board and the public can see the actions that we're taking where they're within our gift to mitigate patient harm. And as we've reported a number of times through the years, we have taken and we are taking a lot of things, a lot of actions that are within our control, one of which we've talked about a number of times today is the change to our clinical model. So we've had a great discussion just now around the clinical navigator role and the rapid screening. But of course, another major part was the go live of our new clinical categories from the 1st of July. So our purple arrest, our red emergency and our RCS 0 categories. And as we've mentioned before, really pleased that the emphasis from a Welsh Government perspective, taking on board what we had put forward, is that the emphasis now is on outcomes for those patients, as you know, and thinking about the chain of survival. So we haven't got any data for that yet. It'll be obviously the first data will come once we get the end of July done, but that will be soon. And the great thing to do, we can also see, is that the phase 2 of that performance framework has been announced by the Cabinet Secretary, again, very much in line with what we had suggested. And so we will have some new categories: time sensitive, orange, assess and response, yellow, and a planned response, green, which will go live. We're hoping now on the 1st of December 2025. So we've just written back to Welsh Government today to confirm that's the date we're looking to go live. So really, the report is there for you to see, but I think that the kind of great thing that we can see is the kind of the improvement in some of the metrics that we've been talking about for a long time. So in line with what Mark has just been telling us, the fact that we've got so many more patients now being moved across to have a remote clinical assessment undertaken. So it was 58% of the calls that the clinical navigators were screening are going across to our integrated care clinicians. And what that means is that those clinicians have got an opportunity to think about different pathways. And you can see there that in this report that has resulted in an increased consultant close rate of 20%. And that is above where we've previously been at around the 15%. So that's really good. We've also seen, you can see in this report, a really welcome reduction in the hospital handover lost hours. So in June, it was only just over 15,000 hours lost. That trajectory is continued into July. That was the lowest month of handover, for nearly 4 years. We have put in this report, whilst that is great news, 15,000 is still a lot of lost hours. So there is still further to go. But we know that the Cabinet Secretary, Welsh Government, NHS Performance and Improvement and health boards are working very hard now to get to the position where by September, October time, we don't have any handover delays of more than 45 minutes. So that's really great to see. And the other one I was just going to bring out was the data on the cancellations. We've talked about this a number of times before. Patients cancelling their ambulance often means, we think, although it's anecdotal, that they take themselves to a hospital, to an ED. That just exacerbates the problem. The EDs become crowded with people who haven't been triaged, who haven't had that initial kind of assessment by a clinician, and it's not what we would want. And you can see a 28% reduction in those cancellations. We want to go even further. I think the ambition is to kind of try and at least halve them. But really good steps in the right direction there. So that's, I think, all I wanted to say on this report. So there is still a lot of work to go. There is still harm, but we can start to see some kind of movement in the right direction here, Chair, which is really pleasing. And a big thanks to all colleagues around the table, but also their teams for all the huge amount of work in this area. Thank you.
Good, thanks, Rachel. And I guess, Colleen, I would just add before I come to the floor that,
it's very hard. You know, when you start a program, you predict that it will have certain benefits. And whilst it's early days and some of the benefits are small, what we are seeing is that where we were predicting benefits, that's what we're actually seeing happening in terms of reduced conveyancing and reduced cancellations and increasing consultant flows and so on and so forth. And the other thing to put into context in terms of the lost hours, just make the point that it has improved 15,000 hours. It's definitely an improvement on the 25 to 30 that we sometimes saw, but also bear in mind that 6,000 hours, I think in my mind somewhere, was the kind of number which is sort of baked in as being the sort of the norm. So we've still got to go from 15 to 6. So there's still a long way to go. Yeah. Opening up to any questions or comments. So Bethan's hand's shot up. So Bethan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to reiterate some of the points that yourself and Rachel has made, because it is great to see that there's around 7,000 less lost hours to hand over in gym this year compared with last year. However, I'm going to say the same thing I always say: we cannot become complacent. Right. Inevitably, we are still seeing patients come into avoidable harm, because our rosters are predicated on way less than half of those amounts of lost hours. So there is significant impact on our patients. And what I wanted to draw out, and I've shared this with some members previously in recent committee meetings, I went to visit some of our colleagues across 2 ED departments early last month, the Royal Morgan and Prince Charles hospitals, and there were visibly fewer ambulances outside. And when I arrived at Prince Charles, there wasn't one. And when one did arrive, the patient was able to be supported off and into the department immediately, which is rare. It's a rarity. There were quite a few outside the other hospital I went to. And in talking with our staff, whilst they are very pleased, they're visibly pleased on the reduction that they can already see, because they talked about the ability to complete more jobs per shift, and they haven't been able to do that for very many years, and that's given them an upbeat sense. However, there is anxiety amongst our staff as well, that will this last? Having said that, I think it's right to draw attention to the fact that some of our colleagues in the hospital settings, they have visibly changed some of their models to allow us to be able to offload patients more quickly. And it's just so good to see that, and long may that continue. The other thing I wanted to say is that you know, when you look at some of the data here, there are still some worrying stats here. For example, particularly the immediate release requests that have been declined, particularly for the Amber 1 category. You know, almost 200 were declined in gym. We know that will cause avoidable harm for those individuals. And, you know, again, the report tells us that 416 people were estimated to have come to severe harm due to long waits outside of EDs in that month alone. So whilst it's absolutely great to see this improving trend, I don't think we've seen it sustained long enough yet to feel comfortable. I hope we will get to that point. And on top of that, we need that significant additional reduction and improvement in order to be able to deliver the support that patients need across Wales, really. So I just wanted to flag that. It's looking good. It's looking better than it has since I've been involved in WAST, but there is still a long way to go.
No, absolutely.
Thank you.
Really important to have that balanced approach.
Yeah, thanks, Beth, and that's helpful. I was particularly looking at the harm figure there, which obviously, you know, looks less, still not great. But what I don't understand, or it doesn't show, obviously a statistical control chart will show us whether that's part of normal variation or if it's actually looking as if it's an improvement. So I just think there's something in that space. And the other bit, by Beth and talking about her experience when you're in Cumtaff area. In Morrison, absolutely similarly in terms of the ED, but where it wasn't great was the emergency assessment unit. So I just want us, I suppose, in terms of the group you're in, that the influence not just at the doors of ED, but the doors of emergency assessment unit is also part of the improvement journey then.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Peter?
Yeah, just following up from what Bethan has said, I recently went up to Ceredigion, which is a very rural area. The staff was saying in the bad times, as it were, they were being dragged out as far as Bridgend in South Wales, which is a 5-hour trip, which has two real implications. One, staff are tired, obviously, in driving through difficult roads. But also, it takes vehicles out of their area. But the good news was, I went there about mid-July, is that they were starting to see some improvement. So the furthest they were going were Swansea, some Shrewsbury, whatever, but not your Bridgends and whatever. So they were really, really grateful for this, because it can get very tiring, doing those long journeys, especially in the winter. So fingers crossed, and I absolutely agree with everything as Bethan has said. It's too soon to see the trend, but there are, certainly staff in those rural areas are starting to see the benefit of not having those exceptionally long journeys.
Thanks, Peter. Mishak.
All right. I want to start by saying thank you to every member of this board for inviting me and for me being part of this. And first, I want to also say thank you to the executive team and all the staff for the good work so far, especially in reducing handover delay and helping more patients at the scene as well. It is clear that the team is really trying to stop avoidable harm, and I truly appreciate that. But I'm still worried about patients in the amber and green group. These are often older and sick people who can get worse if they wait too long. So the report says that more than 500 patients each month could be harmed because of delay. So my question is there any extra step we are taking to make sure that these patients are safe and not forgotten, while we focus on the more serious 999 calls like the red and purple?
Thanks, Mishak. I mean, really good point, because you're quite right that the more we focus on the very urgent, the risk is that the less urgent not get overlooked, but they get pushed back a bit. I don't know, whether you want to take that perhaps, or then Andy between you.
Yeah, no, I can start, Chair. I will start, but none of our patients are forgotten. And I think it's really important for us to highlight that in terms of our approach. The whole clinical model transformation that you've been hearing about this morning is all geared towards its primary purpose of trying to reduce avoidable harm. And it's always been the key mantra to the changes that we've been developing. And that's the combination of what Mark was talking about with earlier clinician involvement, trying to take earlier decisions on the best way to stream patients, with the idea of better connecting them to the services that are right for their needs. Ideally trying to safely and effectively manage more patients in the community, rather than either us or them of their own accord rocking up to an emergency department where we know that the emergency departments have already been incredibly busy.
Yeah.
And where we also know patients are either waiting in ambulances or waiting actually inside the emergency department in waiting areas as well. So it's not been a great experience. And we've sought to do everything that we possibly can not to add into that already strained part of the health system. So the rapid clinical screening is absolutely key. Behind the scenes, what we've got going on is we've got a merging and integration of our two remote clinical offers. So the first is the clinical support desk, which has been primarily 999 focused. So they have had oversight of those patients that are waiting for a response and trying to navigate some of those patients to other pathways, but also the 111 service, who are of course responding to patients who think that they have either a non-urgent or an urgent need, not necessarily an emergency need. Now, we're of a view that we can do best for more by bringing those teams much closer together, hence the name, and you'll hear referred to integrated care. Integrated care is actually our convergence of those two services. And within those services, what we're trying to do is utilise all the resource and opportunities as best we can. Some of those are using non-clinicians, so 111 call handlers using their new system of assessment tool. We've been taking some nines patients, those that may historically wait for quite a long time, through that system to try and get them to an outcome far sooner than waiting. And that's proving quite successful, and we're seeking to make that a permanent part of our model. The other part, I think Mark referred to as well, was called the seasonal desk. Is now becoming a support function for for all year, can't keep having different seasons. So it will become a permanent part of our offer, which is supporting I don't want to use the word holding, but it's supporting patients where they are, either at home, waiting for services to become available or for other services to come to them. And if we can do that effectively with things like remote monitoring, regular contact, we can wrap around more services for the patients where they are, as opposed to relying on having to go to emergency departments. Now, key to the success of that is going to be the pathway development with health boards. And that's why we have to stay really connected with health boards in terms of both primary care offers and community care offers, as well as considering what part can we play in delivering more services to patients where they are. So a whole load of activity is underway. The last one I would specifically want to mention would be falls. Fallers are a high generation of activity for ambulance services. And we recognise that there are opportunities to be able to do more for fallers more quickly. And we're currently working with government around potential schemes to continue to advance that for this winter.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Mitchell. Thanks, Lee. I think unless you want to add anything.
No, I think the only thing that I'd add to that, and it very much builds upon Lee's point, is we are pretty. The question really highlights for us, I think, some of the thinking we'll have to develop as we go along, and that's around moving away from everything being having a regard to time and being time sensitive. With the steps we're taking, both with the new model and what Mark was talking about, if we can isolate and identify who were the time sensitive patients and manage them immediately, the other patients are less time sensitive or indeed not time sensitive at all. And therefore, our interventions need to be based around what's best for their clinical outcome, not how quickly can we get something to them. And that for an ambulance service is a complete paradigm shift, because we've always been focused on just send something, just get something to them. Well, actually, if that something's the wrong something that then just puts a step in the process or delays actually what they do need, then essentially that was a waste of time and probably had a negative impact. If we can refocus for those patients that aren't time sensitive around what's their need, as opposed to how quickly can we get something, that is when we really start to change the game.
It's a really interesting concept, that, isn't it? Because just thinking about it, the fact that as an ambulance service we're a 999 and a 111 implies that people who are contacting our total service are actually people who might historically have never rung an ambulance but would have rung a GP or rung some other primary care provider, but actually they're ringing our organisation instead. So we're seeing more and more people, patients, interacting with our service as a whole, who are a much broader group of people than the people who were historically rung up at a moment of crisis for an emergency ambulance. So I think it's a really interesting point. But a couple of hands up. Can I just go first of all, if you don't mind, Rachel? I noticed that we've got Jane's hand up on the screen. So shall we go to Jane next, then to Rachel, and then across to Matt?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, very much welcome the dashboard, which I think we're using going forward now, aren't we? A really helpful overview on, the multiple parts that we need to be looking at on this. So I just wanted to highlight this opportunity, how, there's a link here to some of the work that we've started to be doing on the Finance and Performance Committee, digging into some of the data. So as an example was the average jobs per shift, which appears in this dashboard, as well as the MIQPR, which we were sort of looking at. And we've really been exploring, right, well, what does that mean? Because it calls all vehicles, and where's the congruence there with the handover delays that we talk so much around? Because I think we're starting to realise that, as we hopefully shift to much better performance from the health board in terms of supporting us in reducing those delays, there will no doubt be an expectation that we're releasing more hours and can therefore undertake more work per shift. So I think it's sort of recognising now that there's probably going to be more scrutiny on the back of the hopeful improvements in the reduction in the handover delays, and standing ready to that. And I know Hugh's team have already started to unpack some of that, Rachel, which is really helpful. So yeah, looking forward to seeing how that particular aspect develops and how that feeds into the respective dashboards.
Thanks, Jane. So to Rachel, then across to us.
Yeah, it was just a couple of things in response to a couple of things that others have raised. So the first, Beth, and I was just going to say that the 2 visits I've done to VPH and to Llangynna, both of them have shown the impact on our control staff as well. So we've got our resource coordinators who are sitting there with perhaps 2 jobs that they're, looking to find resources for and to get resources to, compared to stacks of, the stress, I think, on those staff in days gone by was enormous. So I was really chuffed to see the positive benefit for them as well as for our front, for our response crews. The other thing I was just going to mention in terms of, yes, we still got further to go. The Cabinet Secretary has commenced a series of meetings with Welsh Government and Health Board and Trust Chief Executives to make sure we're kind of really collaborating together. We've held one of those meetings, he's held one of those meetings, another one next week. And, the focus both last time and for this next time will be, one of the focuses of the meeting is going to be on hospital handovers, and just in quite a nice, safe environment, actually, to kind of really think about how we collectively move that forward together. But his priority on this was really evident. So I just thought I'd share that because it was really, really pleasing to see. Thanks.
He's definitely been leading on this issue and many others, but this is one issue he's definitely been leading on. Alison.
Thanks. It's just a reflection on the comment about a paradigm shift, really, in terms of how services are judged, moving away from time-based to outcome-based. Just re-emphasising the importance for the public in communicating that message, not just in the organisational strategic communications, but in the one-to-one interactions people have, because people over time have judged a service because the targets have been time-based on the importance of that time, and they're usually very worried and concerned because something's happening that they don't know or understand for themselves or their loved ones. So that opportunity in every interaction to communicate about why time may not be as important in their particular circumstance is fundamental. And I know you're working hard at doing that, but it is really important that kind of moving is with people and building their understanding as we go along.
Okay. All happy, all content. So thanks, Rachel. Hey, Chuck, Chief Executive. We'll move on to the next item, which is item number 9, which is Trish. That last item, by the way, all to note. So without being boring, reading through, there's quite a few items in there. The names and notes of that. I think we've just taken, we have noted of those. So moving on to Trish to risk management.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the overview of risk in this paper. There's been no changes since 2 months ago, and we wouldn't necessarily expect these big principles risks to move very regularly. But what I can say is that there has been review of all of these through the executive leadership team, and we've spent a good deal of time on these before they came to Finance and Performance Committee as the first stop last week. Next week, we'll see Quest seeing the 2 highest rated risks and People and Culture Committee seeing their risks. And of course, that's the opportunity at that time to really, for that committee to review the controls, the strengths of the assurances against the controls, and importantly, the actions to plug the gaps to actually reduce some of those scores. So it gives a bit more time in order to do that. I think, we've spent the last half hour or so talking about our highest rated risks and those of the JCC, which is 223 and 224. And as we know, the majority of our agendas go towards that and what we're doing to try and reduce that. They remain at 25 despite those handover delays reducing. And as you say, Bethan, there's still a way to go. But I think what was really an interesting conversation, and you'll see it from the AAA and ARAC, was, and you'll see it in Quest next week, which is we presented a new way of looking at 223 and 224. And some of that work has really progressed very well as to how can we separate what's within our control and what's external. so that we can focus a bit more about what are we doing within our control, how are we scoring that if possible. And I think that there's some really good green, well, more than green shoots on that really, because we're showing those assurances against those 3 lines of defence. And I think I know that Lee and Liam's team met yesterday on 223 and 224 to see how they can better align those categories of controls across both. So there's still quite a bit moving with that. So some good movement there. I think as well, we're probably going to be trying to apply that same approach to the decarb risk, because again, there's things that are internal and things that are external. And keeping it as a high risk has been problematic. We've had a number of conversations about that at Finance and Performance Committee. And just lastly, to say really that risk 558 on staff wellbeing, we took it to the WAST partnership meeting last week. And we had a good discussion. We had Occupational Health Manager Kim come along and take us through some of the wellbeing offers as well. And so trade union partners were able to have discussion about the controls and the actions that we were putting in place there as well. So a lot going on both in committees and externally, and they continue to have those robust reviews and conversations going on to see what else we can do.
Good. Thanks, Trish. Peter.
Yeah, I want to come in and just endorse that the last point that Trish mentioned. I think it's really important that we do and can differentiate between those things that are within our control. But nonetheless, at the macro level, we'll keep these as red, and it's something I think we're all challenging with. Yes, they might stay at red, but to what extent are the measures that we're doing, we heard about today, proven to be effective, despite the fact that unfortunately they'll still remain as red. So it's a great piece of work that Trish and Julie are leading on. Great that we're modelling it with 2 highest risk. I think absolutely right. And other issues that have come up periodically where, despite our best endeavours, due to external factors beyond our control, they remain high risk. So getting under the surface, getting under the bonnet and seeing, exactly what can we do, how effective are we, despite the external environment, is a really important development, I think. And certainly as NEDs, I think it'll help us in terms of discharging our responsibility. So I really welcome that development. So I'll go to you and the team.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thanks, Trish. Looking at the screen now, hands up there. So thanks, Trish. We're required to receive the assurance on the reviews and to note the ratings. We've also noted that there were 2 risks that may possibly come down in the fullness of time. So unless there are any other questions, we will move on. And we'll move on to item number 10, which is the MIQPR, which I guess, Hugh, you're going to be taking.
I will, thank you, Chair.
Perfect.
So I presented this report last week in Finance and Performance Committee, so I'm not intending to talk through all of the report. Again, we had a full discussion in committee. I just wanted to really pick up on Jane's points. We particularly honed in, I think, Peter, particularly you were asking me a question. We were looking at quite a small graph on a page that was looking at average shifts per average jobs per shift, and so we subsequently to that isolated that, looked particularly at emergency ambulances, which would be the main one that have improved time as a result of handover reduction, and actually we're achieving 2.89 jobs per shift in June, and that's actually the highest since September 21. So there has actually been quite a significant movement. And actually, just looking back to December, when I think it was 25,000 hours of handover, it was 2.37. So there is quite a marked uptick actually in that. And we've gone on. There was another discussion then about what might be a possible benchmark. Lee and I are having some conversations around that. So I think potentially in future we might reflect a benchmark in the report as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So, as always, MIQPR has a mountain of data within it. Open up for any questions or comments. Rhiannon.
Just a question around the 111 report that's supposed to be due, well, as of now. And I just wondered, is it going to land? If so, do we have any indication of what it tells us and whether that will help us with our challenge of not achieving closer to the 5% that we would like to on the event?
Timing is everything. It's appeared in my inbox during the meeting this morning. So yes, obviously I haven't read it yet. We have had some interim slides before that, which we've shared with the commissioner. What they're suggesting is that, we can make quite a significant shift to how we manage our rosters, potentially moving from self-serve to more fixed rosters, but there is a limit to what we can achieve within the existing resource envelope that we have from commissioners. So that, I think, takes commissioners into a space of, do they want to commission a different level of performance, or do they wish to pay us more? And I think there's a discussion, there's a session with the JCC in August where there'll be a broad discussion on one-on-one, but I know the commissioner has said this is very useful information. We're also doing detailed staff engagement at the moment with staff on potential move, and I think we probably would expect to see those go live in Q4, not in December, January, because it's the wrong time of year.
Okay, thank you. Haley, go again. Haley, go on.
I was just looking at the figures for sickness and turnover rates. I know there's been a slight increase between May and June. I just wondered if that is a cause for concern, if we had any indication of why that might be.
I'm happy to pick that one up. Yeah, we see this seasonally, so we tend to find a little uptick over the summer periods for a number of reasons. So at this moment in time, it's not a cause of concern, but obviously we're going to keep track of it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Haley. Where am I going next? Yeah, Kerry, yeah.
So data quality issues, I think you said that they would be resolved by the autumn. Is that right?
Ideally, I think the pace of change that we are going through in terms of phase one that we've just done and phase two, I think in terms of the priorities that we've got, we're having to really focus our effort. Probably does need to be some organisational flex in terms of, I think the time frame we're going for on phase two is very ambitious. I am, personally, up for that challenge, as is everyone else, but we all recognise it's very ambitious, and we just really need to hone down the resource we've got onto that top priority.
So I completely understand that, but I think, for our government, we should just be, having a date in mind, and if we can't make it because of capacity issues, because, I understand it's not easy to resolve, but I think it is important that we have, at board a clear line of sight, even if it changes. So, and then my other point was just on the immediate release policy and protocol. So with the new performance framework and the new categories, does that mean there's a need to revisit the immediate release policy and protocols? And if so, is that happening?
Then.
Yeah, as part of, I won't leave my answer as short as that, but as part of phase one implementation, there were a suite of standard operating procedures and protocols. Immediate release was one of them, as was the regional escalation protocol. So those are two that are managed outside of WAST, and both have had their reviews in time for the 1 July deadline. And we'll look forward to doing it again for phase two go live. So yes, done.
Thank you.
Good. And Rachel, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, I was going to come back in on the first point, Kerry. So we, recognising the point that Hugh just made, we had a conversation at execs yesterday about, because it's particularly the IDS team that have got all of these things to do. So there is a list of, if we say that phase two is a given, there's a list of other actions which are kind of sitting there, which the IDS team have previously been prioritising. And we recognise that at the moment it is not possible to do all of those things. So Johnny and I are going to meet again to really just kind of rag rate each of those things, and also then to consider whether there are any options for additional capacity either across the organisation or externally that might help us with some of that. because Johnny has got some members of the team. We put some more money into the IDS team, but recruitment, as you know, obviously takes a while. So we're doing that work as an executive team, and we will come back on that question to give you a more definitive answer. Thanks.
Great. Anything to that?
Alison.
Oh yes, I'm so sorry, Alison.
No, that's okay. Thanks. It's just a question relating to non-emergency patient transport services. Some people have raised concerns with us that their booked transport has been cancelled, sometimes late the evening before or the afternoon before they're due to have a scheduled journey. And I just wondered, does your system monitor the level of cancellations and the impact of those cancellations on those people who might not therefore have their planned procedure or treatment?
It certainly measures, we certainly measure the activity, the impact, but the ultimate impact on the patient, I think, is much more difficult for us to measure beyond, obviously, you know, patient surveying that we do. I think in terms of mitigations around that, I mean, the NEPS re-roster is a key thing that we can do, which will make quite a difference. It's quite complex, but we're just completing the modelling, about to re-embark on that. But it won't be all of the answer. I think there is a more fundamental question there to the discussion with the commissioners.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chair. I would add to that. I made a couple of mentions of this actually in the AGM this morning, talking about the last year. We've seen some things occurring within non-emergency patient transport. So firstly, we are seeing some increasing activity. And I mean, one area we know is renal activities year on year is growing, and we expect that to continue to grow. We've also seen some consequences with service redesign. So we've actually seen the average journey length increase and the average journey time increase. Journey time also in some areas impacted by the new speed limits as well. So we do know that we've had some of those factors. The patient presentation is now more complex than it used to be for non-emergency patient transport, and that's now not allowing us to go to have the same rate of carry combined with that mileage and distance matter. So there are efficiency opportunities which this year we'll seek to materialise through the roster review work that Hugh has discussed. We are seeing cancellations occurring for eligible patients, and that worries us. We can't see the consequence, but we know that it's not a good experience. We do have too high a cancellation rate on the day, and that loses capacity. Some of that is because health boards make change. Some of that is because the patient may not be in a condition to travel. And sometimes the patient's not there and we don't know why. So with this, you know, there is a plea as well. I think if the journey is not required to cancel it ahead of time, we're trying to encourage that with more automated mechanisms. So we now have a text solution for that allows patients or service users to cancel that transport if it's not necessary. And we're going to supplement that this year with more notice when the ambulance is actually making its way as well to the patient. So hopefully that will improve experience. But fundamentally, there is going to have to be a further conversation with our commissioners in relation to service capacity. So we will seek to do as much as we can with what we have, but it's likely going to require additional discussion.
And we welcome an ongoing conversation around that.
Thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, and I was just going to add that we have, to be fair to the commissioners, they have picked up this issue. We've raised it with them. They picked it up, and it did feature on the JCC meeting at its last meeting. So they haven't got an answer to it yet, but as Lee said, there are a variety of different things that we can do, but it is on the commissioner's radar as well, because it's definitely something we want to improve. So thank you for your offer of working with you as well on that.
Good. Okay, thank you. And interestingly, I mean, I just bring a couple of the only one I'll just draw attention to because it's connected to this is the family and friends test, which is kind of buried deep down in some of the data on the MIQPL for ambulance care. 92% rating, it was good, which was outstandingly high compared to other areas of the service. I mean, that just reflects. And it also reflects how important this service is. It's a sort of one of the unsung heroes of the ambulance service, isn't it? It's a day-to-day service which is being given to people who have continuing and routine and regular needs. It's not the exciting blue light bit, but it's absolutely critical to many, many people across Wales. Okay, well, look, in that case, let's close this item there. Again, it's generally for notes, so we do that. By some miracle, we're almost to the minute on time, Trish, with your expectations. I don't know whether it's my chairing or your expectations. We're good. Whichever it is, whichever it is 10 to 1 and we're projecting lunch at 10 to 1. So let's break for lunch, 40 minutes. So we'll meet back here at 1:30 to continue. Thanks, everybody. 1:30. People joining us remotely. Welcome to anybody joining us as an observer externally to this meeting, which a reminder that it is an in-public board meeting, the microphone being broadcast to the world, live and available subsequently for. So we're on item number 11, which is integrated medium-term plan. It's a paper for approval. And Hugh, I think it's to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So there are three parts to this paper. There's the Cabinet Sec priorities, the CMT programme and the IMTP deliverables. So I'll just give a couple of headlines. So the Cabinet Sec priorities is 1 blue, 4 green, 2 amber, 5 yellow, cautionary. Generally good progress. The issues around amber and yellow are invariably things like capacity, pace of change, dependencies on the other parts of the system, but I think it's clear from the paper that these are being actively managed. In terms of the CMT programmes, that has given an overall yellow, which is cautionary. I think that's just us being prudent. I think there's a recognition of just the pace of change that we are going at. We are actually making very, very good progress, but we're just aware that it's a big ask on our teams at the moment. But I think we're going for it in terms of phase 2, so that's why it's yellow. And then in terms of the IMTP deliverables, 3 blue complete, 3 green on target, 5 reds and 1 yellow. The 5 reds, they were discussed in the Strategic Transformation Board, acceptance to reprogram those into the year. So again, good progress on that.
Right, well, thank you, Hugh. That's appreciated. Huge amount going on, as we've heard, and some have been talking about over lunch actually. That's the IMTP delivery. There's a lot to deliver and a lot being delivered, and I know you and your team are frantically busy, and everybody's frantically busy, and this paper kind of reflects that, which is good to see. We are definitely not sitting on our hands. So the paper is for noting generally, but we are asked to actually to agree the proposed approach to reporting on the strategic. So there is an item to agree. But let's go for questions or comments. Anybody got questions or comments? Juliana?
I just wanted to understand a bit more about the low confidence in SO5, and it may be the reprogramming comment you just made. So the being quality driven and clinically led, there's a lot in red with that low confidence, isn't there? I just wondered what that means really for us in terms of how critical these are.
Sorry, which one was
So
that?
I'm
SO5.
Appendix B,
Gotcha.
and I'm looking at SO5 being policy driven and clinically led, and it's got basically 4 reds and 2 complete, but it's the low confidence in it as well as the red.
I don't, because Liam isn't here.
No, I know. I'm sorry. I should have quantified my comment. I recognise that Liam's not here to respond. I guess as a board, should we be worried that there's such low confidence in terms of the assessment at this moment, and is there still sufficient in-year time to pull that back on track, or is there stuff that we need to be aware of? And it's probably, if Liam's not here to answer, probably one to pick up.
Yeah, I thought we'll do that, and I think say while they're red, it is about it isn't about not stopping them or not doing them completely. It is about I think we've got things fairly early on in the year, and Liam's team in particular, a lot of his team really engaged with the CMT, the go live of phase 1 and phase 2. All of the quality kind of impacts on that are taking a lot of time from his team. So, but we will take that back and come back with a kind of sense of when's it being reprofiled. Do we then have a confidence in that reprofile date and the extent to what the risks are in not delivering these things earlier? Yeah.
Thanks, Rena. Any other questions or comments?
A comment from me, thank you, Chair. So just on the building community resilience part of the Cabinet Secretary's priority, it's just really pleased to see the collaboration there with Marie Curie on the working regionally and in palliative care. So it's just a comment. I know we've talked a lot about the opportunity for strategic collaboration with the third sector, so it's good to see that in.
Okay, any other questions or comments on progress? What's going on? Good to see where we're at with it all. Okay, in that case, we are agreeing, just check that, we agreeing the proposed approach to reporting on strategic outcomes and benefits. Happy with that, everybody? And the other items to note. Good, all right. In that case, let's move on to item 12, and that's Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I think the paper is read as usual, and we'll also obviously note that this is a write-up of some detailed discussions that we had at some length, actually giving some of the content at the Finance Performance Committee last week, which was prompted by a presentation of a 3-position on the bank. So to cut to the chase, I suppose in some ways the key issue being that identified within the paper some of the additional pressures that have hit us towards the last week or so of June, as we will start to run the month 3 Q1 position. You can see from the paper how that's manifested itself and how it's reported from some of our delegations, and in particular our year-to-date position that has emerged as a result of that. The approach we've currently taken to our year-end forecast at this point in time, as described within the pack. No move to any kind of deficit positions are comfortable one, clearly, even a year-to-date one, which may or may not be able to get offset between now and the end of the year. But at least I think, this one is fully understandable. We know what's driving it. And I think F&P took some assurance by that and the current approach that we're currently suggesting to seek to manage it. I guess the other thing to add at this stage, is a bit of an update between then and now. We still need to recognise there's a lot more still to be worked through in terms of some of this and the actual impact that actually will hit in year. And in particular, I suppose, to the one driver of increasing costs around the Welsh risk pool. And just to update on some discussions we've had across NHS Wales Finance colleagues on that in terms of requesting shared services in particular who manage the risk pool on their behalf to do some more work on that, I guess, in that sense. So to understand, the shift in the forecast currently from not only a few months ago, it's quite a big increase in a fairly short period of time. To be a bit more detailed, I suppose, in terms of some of the drivers and movers for that shift, and to understand, is that it in terms of a shift in year? Is that the worst case now? If it is, okay, that's helpful. If it's not, when will we know any further updates? What's the likely range we might want to put on it rather than just fix a figure at this stage? Because that's going to be as difficult to do as we are having to do ourselves, I guess. So there's quite a lot of work on that. It's interesting, actually, I think, in terms of how some of we haven't all been 100% consistent, I suppose, across Wales, in which how we've treated some of that in our monthly positions now. Some have included a bit more of a risk. I don't think anybody's moved their forecast, not that we have on the back of it. Not all have accrued it into their positions. There's been a mixed economy in terms of that, because it landed quite late in the quarter, to be fair. So we've got a bit more work to do on that. On top of that, clearly, internally, we further progressed more work in the last few weeks. On what we might be able to do to offset some of these increasing costs as they are emerging in year, on top of the contingency we hope to do so. And like I say, it's still quite early in the year for us to forecast some of this to do it. That's certainly a government expectation, though. The only additional correspondence discussion I've had, and it was a brief conversation with the finance director of NHS Wales, was clearly that would be the initial expectation from government is to, what's there for our choices, options, what can we do about it, to continue understands fully, what our position currently moving towards, but what can we do and what's the choices and options that we've got to offset that to still deliver balanced funding with end, and then depending on what they are, what impacts they might have that we need to articulate. We've had a bit of time to sort of do a little bit more internally as well, as I say, since that hit in the last week or so of June, to see how some of our delegated budget positions are currently delivering, and there is some positive movements in that sense. There is some underspends, I guess, against some delegated budgets of the set, which some might be more non-recurrent in nature, but they are emerging and they will be potentially offset some of those costs. And we had our executive finance group in this room yesterday for a good couple of hours, where again, we worked through further options and choices that are emerging to further offset some of that. We're going to work that out and quantify that over the next couple of weeks as well. So, however, what all this has done, and the summary of it, I guess, is clearly the biggest single impact in the short term is that it's increased our risk, and that's the way we sort of describe it, I suppose, isn't it? We've had to signal that increased risk in our ability to deliver balance at the end of the year. And we've done that through our monitoring returns and through this report. Back to the risk conversation earlier, we may need to review risk 139 in that context at some point, probably not for the next cycle, but depending on where we get to in the next few months. Hopefully not, because hopefully we'll find the mitigations, but if we can't, the risk certainly has increased at this stage. So just to finally then sort of, we're not, month 4 today, and we end of month 4 already, so we've got a month 4 position to run next week. So just to update the board on that is looking like, it'll be what it'll be when it runs off the ledger and everything, but it's likely to be similar to what we reported in month 3. We probably won't move the forecast. We're not planning to move the forecast again now in month 4, back on the back of some of that and some of the more positive offsets that have started to emerge, and as we look at other options over the next few weeks. And obviously we'll have much more detailed updates, another couple of months worth of data and a little bit more intel about some of the national stuff, particularly about risk support, which we'll be able to bring through to the next F&P on the 16th of September, and obviously board at the end of the month. So I hope that just adds a little bit more flavour to what we've got in the the factual reported Q1 in the paper. And of course, as ever, happy to take questions or further updates on the conversation we had at F&P on.
Good. Okay, thanks, then, Chris. So comments. Peter?
Happy to kick off.
Yeah.
Just to say, fully endorse Chris's position. I mean, there are some unexpected risks that we've come across. So at this stage in the year, we're still relatively early on, as Chris has said. Who knows what other risks are going to hit us later on. So the approach is absolutely spot on at this stage. I think we do need to recognise, all things being equal at this stage, we are in a deficit position. I'm equally confident that the work Chris and all the senior management team are doing in terms of scenario plannings and the implications of, withholding expenditure or whatever are being worked through. So that was one area at F&PC we did scrutinise, and I think we're confident, and I'm sure Jane will want to come in on this. We're confident that work is going on in the background, but there's Bhumi and I have come in the last few months. We're absorbing the cost of the MT regrading, and 12 months ago we didn't think we would have to. So I think what all this illustrates is, I think, given the general position of the public finances, we're absolutely right to say, look, with 3 months in, who knows what other risks are going to pop up. So really good to get the financial management assurance that we've got. But at this stage, I think, fully endorse the position at this stage. We need to be forecasting a deficit. Hopefully, as the year goes on, that can reduce, but it's appropriate at this time to show the deficit figure that Chris has outlined.
Thanks, Peter. I would echo that, and it's worth reflecting on the fact that the last 2 years we have been squeezed in relation to having to accept more and more costs that we thought we might not have had to meet, plus year on year increasing in size the savings targets which are being demanded of us. Last year was at 6 million. I think this year it's 8 million. So all of these things have been squeezing further and further. The fact that we've produced a balanced budget last year and the year before and previously as well, it's highly commendable. But there does come a time when the squeezing is such that there is nothing left to squeeze out, and maybe we've come to that point. And I think that's what we're kind of flagging at the moment, that it's got tougher and tougher as each year's gone by. This year is the toughest it's been, and we've just had some bad news in the first quarter in relation to unexpected cost increases, which we may not be able to meet in a balanced position. It's absolutely right that we flagged that, and we flagged it with the letter that Chris referenced that goes on the quarterly returns. The first time I think the word deficit has been mentioned in print. Okay, Jane, did you want to come in as chair of F&P and give us a view of your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just sort of echoing Peter's thoughts on that front, and just bringing forward really the alert that we highlighted in the FPC treble A, which I know we will cover later. So thanks to Chris and his team for giving us a very early alert to that, which was absolutely right. So we did spend some time discussing it, but recognising these are two very much external factors that, as Chris has mentioned, will need to be worked through, but absolutely endorse the prudent approach to recognise that in our financial planning at this stage is absolutely correct in our view.
Good, thanks, Jen. Appreciate that. Any other comments or questions to Chris? It's fairly straightforward where we find ourselves at the moment, and plenty of months to go, which could get better or worse. We'll find out.
All right. Everything is to note as far as the recommendations on this item is concerned. So without reading them all over in detail, we take it that we're all notes of various things we're required to note, and we'll move on. That's okay. So let's move on to item 13. Are we expecting Fleur to join us? Oh, is nobody there? Oh, I didn't welcome you, Fleur. Are you there? Can you hear us? Oh, there you are. I can see you now if I lean forward. Well, welcome, Fleur, to join us. And so item number 13, the Welsh Ambulance Service Urgent and Emergency Care Arrangement for Managing Demand Reports. It's an assurance item, and handing over to you, I think, Fleur, for a moment.
Thank you very much, Chair. Found everyone. So this is a piece of work that I think we've talked about it at the board before. We're doing a broader piece of work around urgent and emergency care. This is part 2 of that work, which we've been conducting across each area, looking at how health boards and the trust are managing demand into urgent and emergency care services. I'll take the report as read, particularly recognising that it's been through Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee and the Finance and Performance Committee, but I'll just pull out the main findings and some key issues within the report, and of course happy to take questions after that. So the overall findings were that we found clear evidence through the work that the Trust has and continues to make a range of positive changes to manage urgent and emergency care demand, focusing on community-based care and reducing unnecessary hospital conveyance where possible. However, the impact of these changes is continually limited by systemic challenges, including long handover delays, fragmented data systems, and varying access to alternative pathways across health board areas. One of the particular areas that we draw out is around public information and public engagement. So we did comment on the 1111 Wales website, which needed some urgent updates, but we recognise that there are planned improvements to the website, and a business case to redesigning the website was underway at the time of our fieldwork. We draw attention to the clinical model transformation programme, which at the point in time we did the work was beginning in the early stages of showing the promising results that have been coming from that programme. We also commented on the expansion of clinical support desks and advanced paramedic practitioners, which has improved the consultant close and see and treat rates. Although we did note that there's some work ongoing at the Trust to review some of the data in relation to see and treat to make sure that the good evidence that we continually hear about is coming through in the data. We also looked at the consistent barriers to the Trust accessing some of the more community-based alternatives within the health boards, particularly newer services such as the SDEC and UPCCs. We could see the data, particularly for SDEC referrals, being very low and not at the levels that we'd expect from the national guidance around the criteria for referral from paramedics. So this is due to issues within health boards, which is limiting and making it more difficult for paramedics to access those services, as well as the inconsistent referral pathways between health board areas. And then finally, we kind of look at some of the broader issues around the demand and what the impact of the changes and the plans that have been in place is having. So we can see clearly from the demand data that the increase in red calls has been significant, 178% between February 2019 and February 2025, we quote in the report, and which has led to a deterioration, well, along with another combination of factors, has led to a deterioration in response times, particularly for amber calls. We talk about handover delays, and while we've seen improvements in performance recently, very recently for that, it's still considered to be at considerably high levels and unacceptable levels. It was clear from our review that this challenge is well discussed and understood within the Trust, as well as its impact on causing avoidable patient harm, which I'm aware the paper comes to each board meeting. But we do note that there is work ongoing to capture better and fuller information around avoidable harm as well, which should result from some of the work ongoing to integrate data between trust and health boards, which is a particular challenge at the minute. In terms of recommendations, we make only 2 recommendations within this report, which relate to the 111 Wales website content and working in collaboration with health boards to keep the directories of service up to date. As I mentioned before, this is a piece of work that we're doing across health board areas. So recommendation in particular in relation to directories of service is one that you would see reflected in, I think, nearly all of the reports that we're making to the health boards, as well as recommendations in relation to kind of SDEC referral. So we've had conversations with Trish about bringing the health board reports through to the trust to take a look at if that's something that you'd be interested in. That's all I was going to say, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thanks very much. A really interesting paper. Question or comments, Rhiannon?
Question, please. The paragraph 63, where it's talking about paramedics not being able to access directly into a pathway, and it says here this is due to observations that test that paramedics can't complete. And these services would prefer for patients to be routed through emergency departments first. It was that sentence I struggled a little bit. So is that really what you heard from services, that they would prefer them to go through ED rather than have a direct access?
Yeah, that's what we picked up from some of the field work across the health board, as well as some discussions with members of the trust. I don't know if there's somebody maybe from the board that would want to respond to that, but yeah, that's what we were told in some conversations in various different areas and with the trust itself.
So that just feels at odds, really, doesn't it, in terms of we want more of those direct pathways. And I just wondered where, I suppose, the learning from this audit can potentially be picked up and just sort of, because that can't be true for many contexts. Or
You'd be surprised how many.
Well, I'm sure there's barriers to people accessing, but where it's saying they've got a preference to go through ED, is that, you know, what am I trying to say? Is what they're saying justifiable? Surely there's solutions that can be found. That's what I'm trying to get to. So it may be a perception, but it's how we can.
So fundamentally, it boils down to these other referral pathways, you know, a little bit less risk averse.
Yeah.
So, you know, so for instance, a lot of falls with a head injury. You have guidance that suggests that they don't necessarily need to CT every patient with that head injury, whereas some services will be very reluctant to accept a patient unless that intervention has been carried out before they'll accept them.
And where would you see that being addressed, that kind of blockage there? In this work stream that you're in?
The W45 stuff, I think.
W45.
Yeah, is very much a key place on that, because it's, you know, it's a group of senior clinicians. So
yeah, because this is now in this report, which is helpful to have something to kind of drill down on this now. Thank you.
So thanks, Rhiannon. We might come back to that point in a sense. Johnny.
Yeah, if I can just make a couple of points just to add a bit of colour to some of these. So page 7, the website 111 piece. So there is a bit of work ongoing at the minute. We discussed symptom checkers earlier on in session, so we know the plan with that. Page 24, the information systems piece. It's just a flag. I'm working with the HCW and the broader system across Wales around the national data repository. The work is there. We've got some legal barriers that we need to get over, but I'm working with the system to get those closed out. But ultimately, that's the solution to getting the data connected. And just finally on page 34, directory of service. So we're part of a consortium across Wales that's looking at what the plan and solution is for a single DOS across Wales. So there's been a selected partner consultancy agency applied and it's going to work with us on looking at what that is and really bring that case to life for government. But the key message from us here is having one DOS, not repeating the same version of that system across Wales. So there's some positive activity underway already.
Good. Thank you very much. Looking at the screens. Yeah.
Just a quick one around the completion dates or the recommendations, because they both say May. Was that the planned completion date? The actual completion date, given the commentary just then, I'm assuming it's the planned completion date. So if it's not completed, when is the new completion date?
I don't know. Anybody respond to that?
Sorry, was that on the website? I didn't hear the first bit.
The two recommendations, they both have a completion date in the report set as May 2026.
Yes, that's what's planned at the minute. I guess particularly with the website and the DOS, they require some.
26. I just read it.
So, yeah.
My
That's
fault,
okay.
sorry.
You would
You said it.
You would think it's gone.
Ignore the question, thank you.
You're working fast.
Yeah. I did think it was a short timetable.
We're good, Alison, but not quite. Okay, all right.
Yes, of course, yes.
So, obviously we've received the report in audit, but I just wondered if you had any thoughts you could share with us on the next stage. There's part 3, isn't there? And how helpful that might be in terms of, the trust journey and our ambition in this space. If you had any perspectives to share, or is it too early?
Yeah, absolutely. We are having a lot of conversations internally about part 3, which will draw the national summary. So the aim at the minute is to summarise a lot of the issues that we picked up in the discharge planning kind of phase of the report writing, and then pick up these stages around managing demand into the system, and then to have a specific focus through a national summary on harm and what we can say about the harm that's resulting from unscheduled care. But we're having a lot of conversations with different people about how, recognizing some of the challenges around matching up data, how far we can take that. So I've got a meeting with Wendy and Liam coming up to discuss that. I met with Jason just before he left, and then we've got a couple of meetings with a few more health board reps to try and inform that and make it as strong as we can. So I'd like to give a date, but it's probably going to be a couple of months before we can produce that, given where we are at the moment, but happy to keep you up to date of how that's progressing.
It's really helpful.
Okay, good. Thanks for that. The thought I have reading this, which may be just worth reflecting on for a moment, is that it reinforces what I think I was mentioning a bit earlier on in the first half, how the Welsh Ambulance Service is now encompassing a whole range of services, which is way beyond what an ambulance service used to do in relation to the 111 service, and even in the 9s and so on, people are phoning us. And we can only be effective in delivering that range of kind of third-party triaged remote service recommendations to people who don't need an ambulance, if there are places to recommend them to. And this pathways issue that you were mentioning, Ben, is absolutely critical. The linkage between Welsh Ambulance and the rest of the healthcare system is absolutely vital. And it does seem to me that at times, and I think the point you made, Rhiannon, kind of almost sort of reinforces this, that there are some parts of the system which are a long way behind us in terms of recognising what the ambulance service can do. But we're leading the way in terms of the strategic direction of an ambulance service to be much more clinically focused. Not everybody in the wider health system recognises that, and therefore there is potentially reluctance for some aspects or some service providers not to want to take recommendations direct from ambulance service, because they see the ambulance service still as being the call the midwife conveyancer of people who've fallen over, rather than a modern clinically driven service. So I think to me, it's shouted to me that there's so much more work that we need to do strategically to connect with all of our partners. And the other thing, which I just think it's sort of a bellwether of problems to come, in a sense, on this topic, is that the greatest volume of calls to 111 in this paper was suggested it was dental. When I was listening to calls the other day in North Wales, of the first 4 calls that came into the 111 call handler, who I was plugged in to listen to, were both dental. In both cases, the only recommendation we could give was to refer them to the emergency dental helpline within that particular health board. And that's just one example of where we can take the call, we can give some advice, but actually the advice is you need to see a specialist service. You don't need A&E, you don't need an ambulance, but you do need to see a dentist for 2 different dental reasons, both severe pain caused by long neglect, actually, in both cases. So actually, what I see here is just more evidence of how we need as a service to connect with other providers and make sure they understand that we're developing the ability to diagnose effectively and to recommend correctly to their services. Otherwise, you just build in this kind of, well, must go to ED, must have a CT scan, as Andy was saying. It isn't always the case. Anyway, thank you very much, Fleur. Again, good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't think there's any other questions. I'm looking around for last and final moments. No. All right. So thank you very much indeed, and we'll move on. So we move on to item number 14, which is to Trish again, governance report for approval.
Thanks, Chair. There's a number of things here for noting on Chair's actions that we've made in private session, the use of the trust seal, plus the approval of the accounts that we did back on the 26th of June. So they're all for noting. There is one item for approval, which is the WAST terms of reference. They're endorsed at the WAST meeting in May. There are only some minor changes. We made changes that we've made similar to the other committees to bring in the Wellbeing Future Generations Act provisions and our Wellbeing Objectives, Social Partnership and Procurement Act. And we also amended some wording around publication of papers to endeavour as far as we could to make sure that the trade union partners pre-meet had the papers, as many of the papers as possible, if that pre-meet was before the 7 days that they would normally go out. And I think we're making good progress on that. And we also included the addition of authority for chair's action, which in WASP is unlikely to be needed because the only thing really for approval as such was things like the annual report. But we've put it in because we put it in all of the others as well, so that they're all aligned. So that's just for approval.
Okay, good. Any questions? Any comments to Trish? A couple of things to note, one thing to approve. Looks like everybody's content, nothing on the screen. So in that case, two things to note, which we duly do. We are asked to approve the Welsh Ambulance Service terms of reference, the WAST partnership teams. Yeah, terms of reference. All happy to approve those? Good. All right, thank you very much. In that case, we're moving on to the latter part of the agenda. Board and committee reports. Remuneration committee, I don't have anything to add. Happy to take any questions. We've had some remuneration committee meetings recently for various things in the trust. If everybody's content, leave it at that's a matter of record. Okay. In that case, move on to Quest and highlight reports from you, Bethan. And
thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. We obviously have a AAA report in front of us today from an extraordinary meeting of Quest that was held on the 13th of June. There was only one agenda item to consider duty of quality annual report, which the committee were delighted to endorse and put forward to Trust Board for approval. And as colleagues will know today, that was considered by Trust Board later on that month on the 26th of June. And I'm very pleased that it was approved. So I have nothing more to add at that point.
thank you very much. Okay, any questions to Bethan in relation to committee of the quality? No, good. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to Peter. Anything you wish to draw to our attention you haven't already done so from audit and risk?
Not really, Chair. It was a positive meeting. The accounts, as you know, and the annual report were of a very high standard. Board's already approved that. The internal audit programme for this year has started, and we received 6 reports, 4 of which went to FPC, which I'm sure Jane will talk about. One report did receive limited assurance, and that's the start of shift procedure. And that's all around operational requirements of vehicles. You know, when staff leave the previous shift and those staff who inherit the vehicles. But we were content at our act that the vehicle accident management task and finish group will handle those. And they are operational issues, but they're nagging operational issues, which means the start of shift isn't as efficient and as ready as it could be. I will draw out 2 positive highlights though. The internal auditors looked at our follow-up, and our closure rate in Q3 for 24-25 was 67.9% compared to the all Wales average of 65.1%. So we're ahead of the game, and that's backed up by our audit tracker update, where we had 51% of actions closed, which is up from 27%. So what that's saying is the Trish, Alex and others, and indeed the whole team are taking these audit findings seriously and acting on them, which is really, really important. I'll just one final point, Chair, we did discuss the risk management in quite some detail that Trish has already said, and we really sort of welcome that differentiation between internal and external factors. Finally, the integrated governance work that's going on, we gave that due scrutiny, but really all thumbs up. It's going really well.
Good, thanks.
Happy to take any questions.
Grand, yeah, thanks, Peter. Any questions, comments to Peter in relation to audit and risk? Okay, so to Jane, we'll come to you. Anything you wish to inform us of as a result of your most recent engagement in finance and performance?
I'm just going to pull out a couple of things, Chair, if that's okay. We've already covered the alert in connection with the finance item, and also just to mention around the emergency preparedness in terms of that we've shifted to partially met from fully met to recognise consistency in terms of how we're reflecting our learning from the Manchester Arena inquiry. We've had some obviously detailed updates. It's all in the report, but just wanted to draw out two other things. One was in terms of the financial sustainability programme, so tangential to the finance element that we've covered there. We had a really detailed update from Carl about the broader work done in all multiple aspects really in terms of that. So the committee drew great reassurance, I think, from that. So really going to build on the momentum of that, and it's demonstrated how much we need that. And also just reflecting, the committee very much enjoyed the deep dive on the digital. I think the 5 pillars there sort of demonstrated the real breadth of work and the actual impact of digital just on a day-to-day aspect. It's touching so many parts of the organisations now to such a high degree. And the work it does, it's absolutely pivotal to the ongoing delivery of the clinical model for transformation. And obviously we teased out a little bit on AI as well, but I'm happy to take any questions, but obviously there's quite a detailed report there for colleagues on the board.
Great, thanks, Jane. There is indeed. Any comments or questions to Jane relating to finance and performance? Doesn't look like it. Okay, good, thank you very much. In that case, we can move on to the last few items, the consent items. Item 16, we've got copies of board minutes for committees, audit and risk and finance and performance. They were there for us to note. Also a JCC highlight report. Board, in case anybody wants to raise any questions on any of those. No, there for noting. Closing item then, reflections on the meetings and summary decisions. I won't go over all of them. We've made a few approvals during the course of this meeting, and we've noted those things that we need to note. Does anybody have any reflections or anything they wish to add at this stage? All content that we've done what we need to do? Good, thank you very much. I don't have any other business that I've been notified of. Anybody wishing to raise any other businesses? No? Excellent. In that case, all that remains is date and time of the next meeting, which is 20th of September. Let's see you all here. And at that point, I can close the meeting. So thank you very much, and meeting closed.